The troublesome trucks are notorious for causing trouble. They'll let their brakes slip on to slow trains down, they'll bump and bounce around along the tracks, and on their worst days, they'll cause a serious accident. There are a couple engines on Sodor who can handle the troublesome trucks quite well, but unfortunately they are the exception and never seem to be enough to stop them for good. One day, Thomas came into the shunting yards to collect his goods train.
About time you showed up.
What are you talking about? I'm right on time.
Well, we're not organized into a train yet, are we?
I was planning to organize you guys, but I can't when you're yelling at me.
Then get going, Mr. Short and Stumpy.
Laughed the trucks.
You show him, big sis Diane.
Thomas got to work shunting his train.
Hey, stop bumping us.
Oh, like I shouldn't bump you after you call me Mr. Short and Stumpy.
All right, how about I call you Mr. Short, Stumpy, and Bumpy?
Laughed the trucks.
You show him, big sis Diane.
Thomas finally got his train put together. The conductor blew his whistle, and Thomas started off. But as he tried to leave, hey, who's letting their brakes slip on?
We're not ready yet.
Oh, for goodness sake. You were so worried about being on time, and now you're saying you're not ready yet? Make up your mind.
Hey, I'm ready to go, but you didn't ask the rest of the trucks if they were ready to go. You just started leaving.
I have to leave when the conductor blows his whistle.
Then tell the conductor not to blow his whistle right away, Mr. Short, Stumpy, Bumpy, and want to leave before everybody is ready.
Laughed the trucks.
You show him, big sis Diane.
At last, Thomas finally got to leave the station. But as he puffed down the line, Diane continued to complain.
Hey, can you stop being so rough?
Hey, can you just shut up, Diane?
No, I won't. I will speak as I like, Mr. Short, Stumpy, Bumpy, Rough, and want to leave before everybody is ready.
Laughed the trucks.
You show him, big sis Diane.
You are really starting to get on my nerves.
Good.
Thomas eventually reached Gordon's Hill. He started to climb, but the train got heavier the further he went up. Thomas knew what that meant. Hey, can you guys stop holding back?
No, we won't. Why should we be nice to you after you've been so rude to us?
Okay, that is it. Thomas stopped as he reached the top. You, Diane, have been the rude one. You yelled at me for being on time. You complained when I shutted you into line. You let your brakes slip on right when we're leaving the station. You whined about me being too rough, and now you held me back while I'm trying to go up Gordon's Hill. I am not going any further with you, big sis Diane.
Fine. We'll just have to make you go.
Wait, what?
All right, everyone, push with all your might.
On, laughed the trucks. And just like that, Diane and the troublesome truck set Thomas racing down the hill. Whoa, cried Thomas. Stop pushing, stop pushing.
It's too late, Thomas, shouted Diane.
You can't stop us. Ah ha 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 ha! Laughed the trucks. You show him, big sis Diane. Roared Thomas. And you guys wonder why we call you guys the troublesome trucks.
Oh, it's no secret, Mr. Short, Stumpy, Bumpy, Rough, want to leave before everyone is ready and stopping on the hill because you're a big baby.
I hate you, Diane.
Same to you, Thomas.
I hope we crash.
Well, you're in luck. Here comes a sharp bend.
The crash was massive. Trucks laid all over the place. Thomas's driver, fireman, and conductor all had injuries. And Thomas and Diane just stared at each other. They didn't say a word, because they didn't have to. They were enemies. Harvey came to help clear the mess. Sir Topham Hatt was very distraught. "What has happened here?" Then he looked at Diane. "Oh, I understand now. Diane, you have caused a serious accident."
What? It's not my fault. It was Thomas.
"No, it wasn't, Diane, and you know it. If you don't shape up soon, then I'm going to have to make other arrangements. Do I make myself clear?"
Yes, sir.
"Good." And with that, Sir Topham Hatt walked away. Will Diane ever stop being so rude? Well, that's a story for another day. It was a couple days after her crash with Thomas. Diane the Troublesome Truck was waiting for an engine to collect her and the train. She surprisingly didn't cause much trouble after Thomas was sent away to the works. But that was about to change very quickly. While she was waiting, Daisy cruised up.
I haven't seen you around here, said Diane.
I'm not usually around here, replied Daisy. But considering the stunt you pulled last week, it was necessary for me to come back.
Are you here to take us?
Oh, heavens, no! You'll never see me pulling trucks.
Why not?
It's fit as orders. Pulling is bad for my swerves. Of course, I seem to be the only one who understands that. None of the other engines on the island understand what it is like to be a diesel rail car.
And none of the engines on the island understand what it's like to be pulled and bumped around all the time. I try to tell them, but they never listen.
Actions speak louder than words, darling. If you want to make a point, you can't just whine about it. You need to take action, like you did last week. Maybe this time, you should try something bigger. Then they'll listen.
A few seconds later, Percy chuffed in to collect his train.
Hey, no bumping, snapped Diane.
Oh, shut up, Diane, said Percy.
If anything, you deserve to be bumped after what you did to Thomas.
He had it coming. Now get going, you green caterpillar.
Fine.
And Percy puffed out of the yard. To Percy's surprise, Diane and the troublesome trucks were really quiet. Percy thought this was a good thing. But little did Percy know that Diane and the trucks were plotting. Something was about to go down at the Ffarquhar Quarry. Percy arrived at the quarry. He left his trucks and then went onto his side for a rest. At that moment, Mavis came up to organize the trucks. She gave the trucks a bump.
Hey, watch what you're doing, said Diane.
Sorry, I didn't think I bumped you that hard, replied Mavis.
Well, you did, said Diane. Me and my friends don't like getting bumped around by you big fat hunks of metal.
Puh, said Mavis. With that attitude, I had to bump you some more.
Mavis finished shunting the long line of trucks into place, so Percy came back to help push the trucks into the mine shaft.
Stop being so pushy, said Diane. We literally have to push you, said Percy. You're such a complainer, Diane. Why aren't you being quiet anymore?
But Diane didn't respond this time. Everything was falling into place. Percy and Mavis took the trucks to the mine shaft and stopped just before entering. It all happened at once.
Now! Pull hard now!
On, said the trucks, and they entered the tunnel.
On, faster, faster, screamed the trucks as they rocketed down the tracks. Bump around, said Diane. Bump around like it'll be your last.
And so the trucks did. They bumped and bashed around like mad.
How do you like that? Shouted Diane.
But Diane looked back and there was no engine. Mavis and Percy had been uncoupled quickly and weren't in the mine shaft.
Oh no! Stop bumping! Abort the mission! We don't have an engine behind us!
But it was too late. Mavis and Percy heard the crash from inside the mine shaft, and then came the siren. "Get out of here fast! The mine's collapsing!" And it was. Rocks and dust flew all over the place. Men hustled and shouted. Mavis and Percy were quick to act. They took some empty trucks and told the men to jump in. Once everyone was in, Mavis and Percy made their escape.
But deep inside the tunnel, a very scared Diane was trapped, alongside her fellow trucks and several workmen. Giant stones fell all around them. There was no hope of survival.
"Take cover under me," shouted Diane. "It's your only chance."
And so the workmen ran over and hid under Diane and the other trucks. Finally, the dust had settled. The Ffarquhar Quarry was practically destroyed. Percy and Mavis stared in horror. A rescue team was quickly brought in to save those trapped in the tunnel. Sir Topham Hatt was speechless.
"What has caused this disaster?"
he asked. Mavis and Percy did their best to explain what happened. Sir Topham Hatt pondered.
"Was Diane on that train?"
"Yes, sir."
"I see."
But before Sir Topham Hatt could continue, Harold flew overhead. "The trapped workmen have been found. We got them from the other side of the tunnel. They say they wouldn't have survived if it weren't for the quick thinking of a truck named Diane."
"No way,"
said Percy and Mavis.
"The trucks are severely damaged. We must get them to the steamworks if they are going to survive." "Then fly them over here," shouted Sir Topham Hatt. "Percy and Mavis will take them to the works straight away."
And so Harold flew over each truck one by one, and then the two engines raced them to the steamworks. Soon, every truck was saved and being repaired at the works. A workman was about to start working on Diane, but Sir Topham Hatt stopped him.
"Just a moment, sir. I have other arrangements for this one."
What were those other arrangements for Diane? Well, that's a story for another day.
It had been a couple days since the Ffarquhar Quarry disaster. Sir Topham Hatt was waiting outside the steamworks. The workmen there were working on the other arrangements for Diane the Troublesome Truck. At last they were finished, and Rosie pulled Diane out of the sheds. Except Diane looked very different from what she used to be. She now had benches in her hall and doors installed on her sides.
What happened to me?" asked Diane.
"These are the other arrangements I was talking about, Diane," said Sir Topham Hatt. "You are now no longer a troublesome truck. You are a roofless passenger car."
Diane was appalled.
"What?" she said. "Why would you do this to me?"
"Well, Toby has been in need of a second carriage for his passenger trains, and I think you would make a nice passenger car."
"Oh, and I'm sure you didn't do it just so I would be separated from the other troublesome trucks and therefore cause less problems."
"Exactly," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Now, Rosie, take Diane to Toby. He'll be waiting for you at Elsbridge."
"Yes, sir."
And Rosie left the steamworks with a more than annoyed Diane.
Rosie soon arrived at Elsbridge. Toby was waiting with Henrietta, just as Sir Topham Hatt said. Before Diane was shunted into place, Daisy cruised through the station. Diane glared at her, but Daisy just laughed. After that, Rosie quickly shunted Diane behind Henrietta.
"Woohoo, I'm so excited," said Diane.
"Oh, come on, dear," said Henrietta.
"It won't be so bad. You might actually enjoy being a coach. We'll see about that."
The passengers climbed into Diane, marveling at the strange new coach. Diane was starting to feel self-conscious.
"Can we go now?"
"We have to wait for all the passengers to get in," said Henrietta. At last, all the passengers were in their seats. The conductor blew his whistle, and with that, Toby set off down the line. As Toby trundled down the line, Diane was trying to find something to complain about, but to her surprise, she found nothing.
"We're going really smoothly," she said. "Not too rough and not too fast. It's just right."
Toby smiled. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself. I'm not gonna lie, I expected you to complain a lot more."
"You guys call it complaining," said Diane, "but I'd call it stating facts. You engines always bump us trucks around for no good reason."
"No good reason," said Toby. "What about all those accidents you caused by pushing us engines?"
"We bump you 'cause you bump us.
You engines always think you're so much better than the trucks. You insult us even if we're in a good mood, and you'd rather be doing anything than pulling trucks. Have you ever noticed that whenever we cause an accident, it's because an engine has been being a jerk?
Yes, I have noticed that, said Toby. That's why I'm always careful when I'm pulling or shunting trucks, because they will fight back if I'm not careful.
And if any feelings are hurt, said Henrietta, then I will do my best to soothe them and calm everyone down.
Huh, said Diane. You two make a pretty good team. You understand trucks better than almost any engine on Sodor.
What Toby doesn't know about trucks, said Henrietta, isn't even worth knowing. My Toby is an experienced one.
I guess so, said Diane. You know, I kind of like being a coach. It's very refreshing. But I don't think my truck siblings would appreciate me saying that. Toby laughed. I can talk to the other engines if you want, he said. If you don't want the trucks bumped around all the time, I can make it clear to the other engines you guys don't like that.
You'd do that for me?
Of course, Diane. Of course I will.
Thanks, Toby, for such a splendid ride. I can't wait for tomorrow.
No problem, replied Toby, and after all the passengers had left, Toby took Diane and Henrietta to the carriage shed. Diane has been a passenger car for a couple weeks now. She likes her new life of carrying passengers along Thomas's branch line. The trucks are much happier now that the engines don't bump them as much, and the engines are happier because the trucks are less obnoxious. Diane's new start really was for the better, and nothing could change that. A couple days later, Thomas finally came back from the works. And how did he react to Diane's new changes? Well, I hate to say this for a third time, but that's a story for another day. Thomas had been at the works for a very long time. His accident with Diane the Troublesome Truck had taken a toll on him. So much of him had to be repaired and replaced. Thomas hated Diane. She was his enemy. But while Thomas was being repaired, Diane was going through some changes. By the time Thomas was finished being fixed, Diane was no longer the same truck she once was. She wasn't even a truck anymore. She was a ruthless passenger car. And she no longer hated Thomas. But Thomas didn't know this, so when he finally returned home, he was very shocked to see Diane at the back of Percy's passenger train. "You!" growled Thomas.
"Hello, Thomas," said Diane. "Welcome back.
I see you're no longer a truck anymore. Definitely for the best."
"You'd be surprised," said Percy. "She makes a great carriage. Diane mainly goes on Toby's trains, but—"
"Good," interrupted Thomas. "I don't want her on my train. I'll never pull her. Mark my words." And Thomas stormed away.
"He doesn't seem to be doing any better," said Diane. "He'll calm down eventually," said Percy. "But of course, sometimes eventually can be very, very long."
Unfortunately, Percy was right. Thomas was still very cross with Diane, even after a couple weeks. It was starting to become a problem for the other engines.
"How do we stop him from being so bitter?" Diane asked Toby.
"Well," said Toby, "the only way to make up a quarrel is to have the two people talk honestly with each other and show that you have both have changed for the better."
"How do I do that?" asked Diane.
"We'll find a way," said Toby. "We always do." Diane was fitted with new brakes when she was rebuilt. They've proven to be very useful when stopping trains at the station and when other coaches' brakes fail. One day, Thomas was stopping at Elsbridge, but he overshot the platform. Once he backed up, an inspector came and examined Plarail. "The brakes were hard on," said the inspector, "but the train didn't stop. The pipe must be broken. We'll have to get another brake coach. But the only coach with brakes in the yard is Diane," said the station master. "Absolutely not," snapped Thomas. "I will not have Diane on my train." "We don't have a choice," said the station master. So Diane was coupled up behind Annie and the passengers climbed aboard. Then, with the blow of a conductor's whistle, Thomas crossly set off down the line. Don't think about letting your brakes slip on, said Thomas after a while.
I wasn't planning on it, said Diane, but I might if you keep yelling at me.
Why shouldn't I yell at you? You were the one who caused my most serious accident today and the Ffarquhar Quarry disaster. Why are you even still on this railway? You're nothing but trouble.
I'm still on this railway because Sir Topham Hatt gave me a second chance. You might not know this, but when the mines were collapsing and the workmen were trapped, I told the workmen to hide under me and my siblings. We ended up saving them. So, in return, Sir Topham Hatt saved us. He rebuilt me and my friends, but he rebuilt me into a passenger car for a new start, and probably to separate me from the other trucks. I then joined Toby's train. Him and I had discussions over the past week. He's very wise and cares a lot more about the trucks than many other engines do. He helped voice my concerns, and now life on the railway for the trucks and engines has been better. I mean, when was the last time you heard about an accident with the trucks?
Thomas and Annie realized they haven't heard of any new crashes.
Thomas, I'm not the same truck I once was, literally and figuratively. I messed up many times in my life, and I've become an enemy to you. So, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was rude to you. I'm sorry that I played tricks on you. And I'm sorry I caused the crash that sent you away for a long time. I hope you can forgive me.
Annie noticed that Diane was starting to cry.
There, it's okay, she said.
Thomas thought about what Diane had said. I want to believe you, he said. But you can't just tell me you're better now. You have to show me.
Yeah, I know. Actions speak louder than words, after all, said Diane. Daisy told me that one.
Well, that explains a lot. Diane and Annie laughed, and with that, the three of them continued steadily down the line. When they had continued through the Hattenbeck Tunnel, Diane noticed a few stones fell.
Could that be the start of a landslide? She asked herself.
When it was time to go back up the valley that afternoon, Diane was now very worried. Things were going well, and Thomas was heading for the seemingly normal tunnel, but Diane couldn't help herself.
We have to stop!
She applied her brakes, and the train stopped just before the tunnel. Why did you stop? Asked Thomas.
There might be a landslide, she said. I saw some rocks falling at the tunnel, and...
A big rock fell to the ground. Cinders and ashes, said Thomas. A landslide's starting. Thomas puffed his pistons, and they raced into the tunnel. The landslide had blocked the end of the tunnel, but Thomas, Annie, and Diane were safe. That was close, said Thomas. Thank you, Diane. You were a hero.
Oh, please, said Diane modestly. You were the one who got us out of the landslide.
You're both heroes, laughed Annie. 3 cheers for Thomas and Diane. Hip, hip, hooray, went the passengers. Thomas and Diane beamed with pride. It had now been a couple days since the landslide. Thomas and Diane have made up their feud and are now very close friends. The other engines were very happy about this, until Thomas and Diane started complaining together. Diane still works with Toby, but sometimes you'll see Diane on Thomas's train as a special coach. Everything seems great for the branch line engines now, and I'm just happy that I don't have to say that's a story for another day for the 4th time. Aren't you?